Divine Source, Great Spirit, Ancient Ones, Ancestors, beloved helpers, we call on you this day to be with us. We're here on an errand of love, an errand of truth-seeking. We ask for your love and your grace to guide these words and to bring forth with us the healing and the energetics that are most helpful for one and all. And so it is.
I always knew it was you. Oh, I knew that you were the one. Yeah, you were the one for me, the only one that could ever make me.
Welcome to Talking Spirit. This is episode 12. My name is Jutta and I'm back with my friend Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone.
So we're going to be talking about relationships. Hot topic, always in the mind, I think. Yeah, that just seems to be the topic that has settled in this morning. And yeah, there's so much we could talk about. And I think maybe we're going to a little bit de-romanticize the romantic visions that are in the mind around relationships and finding a or the significant other and placing our self-worth into other people in terms of, romantic relationships, intimate relationships. And maybe we'll go into, the underlying reasons for dynamics that can happen in relationships. What makes us even look for intimate relations with other humans? So, as always, we're in a prayer and we'll just see what wants to come out.
Yeah, once again, I think it's just really important to say that we're here first and foremost to answer the call of our hearts for our own healing and for our own awakening and to be in service. And so, that's just kind of the foundation of our lives. And so whatever shows up is an invitation. We know it's an invitation from the Spirit for something for ourselves. And so hopefully there'll be something helpful to one of you. I just kept seeing the last couple of days someone from a journey of mine, part of my life, a woman I knew for a time. And, she had been married and had a family and done those kinds of things, and then went through a divorce, and I knew her at whatever period after that. And she went through various relationships during that time that I knew her, and every time there was somebody new, it was like after the first or second date, there was this look in the eye and this I found the one. And it wasn't always said right away, but there was that look, that kind of secret holding on, like I've got a special something in my heart. And finally, here it is. And it was always the one for that moment, but never the one, which is for so many people in the mind, that there's some special someone that is more special than anything else in the world. It has taken this position in the mind of so much significance. And so I was just seeing that person and that kind of message, and eventually saw that there was this little one in her being, maybe a split off aspect or a persona that had kind of taken hold and was really dragging her around in terms of her idea of relationships and so-called intimate, the idea of a sexual partner and somebody that you might share your life with. That's what it usually means for most people to say an intimate relationship. It's not really what it means to me at this point in my life. But anyway, so that was sort of churning around in the background for me the last couple of days. And so it just felt right to look at some of these ideas today.
Yeah, it's interesting. If I look back at some of my relationships, actually, when I was growing up, I sort of had this idea, very romantic, like, oh my God, like if only I could find somebody, because I had a pretty low self-worth when I was growing up, because I was I wasn't ugly, but I wasn't like, oh my God, blown away by her beauty, sort of, like I always thought there were way cooler and prettier girls in my classes, and they had all the boyfriends starting like 12 years of age, starting with the boyfriends, and I had my first boyfriend when I was 16. But leading up to that, it was like I had such an unrealistic view of what relationships are. And then throughout the relationship that I had then too, obviously 16 is still so young, what do you know? And yeah, like I think there was a sense of like, I just want somebody to take care of me. I just want some outside reflection of I'm great, like I can be loved or something. Mm-hmm. And so that was sort of leading years of searching for relationships for me, even before that. And then when I met my husband and we got married, again, like the dynamics, it was still that kind of like, I'm being saved, or I can save somebody. I can like pour all of my attention into this one person, and everything's going to be okay for the rest of my life. And then of course, we get the honeymoon phase, and then comes the real work. And if you're not really there for the real work, it's not going to work. And I think I was lucky because we did kind of grow together. We were like the same age and sort of, grew into spirituality together, but also in different directions in a way, because that's just where our minds were wanting to go. But we did have like a mutual support. And, when we when we ended that relationship, it was amicable. But even after that, there was still, and there's probably still stuff in my mind around relationships, that is pulling me into feeling like I need somebody to have some kind of, reflection that I don't have to do it alone. There's still a bit of a sense of like, I don't want to have to do it all alone. But more and more for me, there's just a realization like, I'm never going to make another relationship happen. That's just not what I want to be doing, which is kind of patterns that I would have in the past. But yeah, I think there's such a richness in that topic of relationships, because there are deep beliefs in the mind that somehow we're incomplete without another person. And I don't want that anymore. If I have another relationship, we have these conversations like, I don't know if I'm ever going to have another like romantic relationship, because it's like so unattractive. When you see through when the rosy sunglasses fall away of what relationships really are, you just come at it with a different perspective and different point of view of the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, both of us have done, as I'm sure many that will listen to this have done, a lot of deep inner exploration, a lot of personal healing work and kind of inventory work around what has driven us in our lives on all levels. And, so I've taken a lot of looks at my relationships on all levels, with my mom, with my dad, with my siblings, with former partners, with business people, with teachers, employers, you name it, you've got it. I've picked them apart pretty hard. And yet there's still these places I don't know about my mind and don't know about myself. And we've shared in some of these other talks about how we sometimes pick charms and cards before we start a recording, just to see what energetics we're not fully conscious of. And it's interesting, I pulled a lion and two other charms, and when I first saw the lion, I thought, oh, it's about the Christ and the kind of potency and the strength and this fierceness, and I had all these ideas about it. And then as you were starting to talk, I flashed back to kindergarten. And I don't know if I ever had like an allowance, but somehow I got like 50 cents. And my mom was around that time. I guess we stopped for like a tag sale or something. I don't know what. And I bought with my 50 cents a lion's head. And it was gorgeous. It was like a carved wooden, really beautiful. It just spoke to my heart so deeply. And I decided some guy that I liked, some young man in kindergarten, should receive this precious gift that was precious to me.
Oh.
And I gave it to him on the playground. And later that day in the sandbox, literally in the sandbox, he hit me with a frying pan hard. And it really was an experience that carried through my adult relationships.
Yes.
We were talking early on about these sort of Disney, Cinderellas and Sleeping Beauties and all of these, like waiting on Prince Charming or waiting on my beautiful goddess princess, all these kind of fantasy land, programming that we come into this world receiving on some level. These are archetypal, energetic storylines that are they're really twisted programming that are meant to keep us distracted and unclear about what we're here for. Anyway, there I was with my little, I don't know how old you are in kindergarten, but
like 4 or 5.
You're little. And I had a dynamic starting really early of, if I give you what I love, I'm going to get beaten up for it. We get these twisted kinks, right? And sometimes they come from parents, and there was this little bit of that kind of dynamic for me with my dad. You're not quite good enough. I love you, but you're kind of missing the mark, in terms of really, because he wasn't within himself in alignment in all ways, right? So how can you be a reflection for anyone that they could be in alignment with themselves, right? So we get these patterns, based on the reflections and the way we perceive things and yada, yada. Anyway, for me, there was this idea of, there must be something really wrong with me to have given this precious lion's head to you, and I get smacked in the head with this plastic frying pan. Hard, heavy, hurt, painful, and horribly disheartening. Just really painful to my heart. And so, again, we have these patterns that we sometimes aren't even aware of. Now, that's a storyline I was aware of, but it's not the one that showed up when I first saw this lion. But this is the point of these talks, is like, what is still in my mind? Oh, I remember that still. That's a memory that's still really present. It's not one that I'm conscious of in my day-to-day thinking about relationships or intimate relationships. But boy, that pattern carried through a lot of my relationships. Dismissiveness, kind of coldness, being sort of removed mentally and emotionally, and me going after the people that I was in relationship with, going, hey, I love you. Here's my love. Here it is. Don't you want to feel the love with me? And often it was a big no. I like having you around, but I don't necessarily want to share my heart with you. I don't necessarily want to be intimate in the true way of in my mind with you, because that's where true intimacy resides, is in our mind. It's not actually in bodies. And so, for me, there was a lot of time of, as you said, like looking for some kind of, you didn't say it this way, but I heard it for myself as like a validation. I'm worth something. I, have a reason for being on some level, looking for some acknowledgement of my worth. And they never satisfied. My relationships never satisfied that, ever.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things for me in terms of relationships has been like how my tolerance for what doesn't work has gone so small. Because, after my marriage ended, I had like 3 more relationships after that. And with each one, they just got shorter and shorter, because that tolerance for not feeling like this is actually supporting my mind's healing I was just so much more aware of, this is just not working. I'm out of here. Like I remember I had this one relationship and it didn't last very long, but like the way we got together was like, it felt really sweet, and like there was a lot of communication beforehand. And then once we got together, there was this sense of like being afraid of getting too intimate, like I remember we would have breakfast and, we would make it together, or he would make breakfast for both of us and, like nice coffee and like whatever, just a nice simple breakfast. And then immediately he would turn on some kind of podcast or something to fill the space. So there wouldn't be this like, we could touch on some subjects that we, I'm not comfortable going towards. And that was kind of, I quickly found this like, there's my wall and you're not going to go through that. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. And he was a really lovely person. He just didn't really see that. And, I probably years before would have tried to really like help him see it, like we can go through this wall, but it just wasn't, my tolerance just got so much lower for these kind of, I've got somebody to rescue. Mm. My love is so good that it's going to break through these walls, these weird, twisted sort of ideas around my purpose. Mm. Thinking that my purpose isn't like helping this one person, when in reality, for years, the spirit is just asking me to widen my range, so to speak, of, where I can be truly helpful. And yeah, there's we can get into such littleness with relationships. And, like we're talking here as if all relationships are just bad and don't, it's not like we're saying you shouldn't get into relationships. They can be amazing when you're both in the right space and it's really like something provided by the spirit, because I've had that as well, and that's really transformational. And the whole purpose of them, those kind of relationships that are guided by the spirit for the healing of the mind, is that you get to just expose all of those patterns that were previously tucked away, and the relationship was used to cover them and keep them tucked away.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk around the idea of being an unhealed healer. And, that's a label I can certainly claim, having been a driving force for me in many of my so-called intimate relationships. Mm-hmm. Is like taking on a project. And that's not to say that I haven't loved the men that I've been in relationships with and haven't valued, the things that they brought to the table that, are just tremendous gifts, all of them beautiful, beautiful beings. But I would say to any of them to their face today, and would have said to them in person, how there were parts that clearly didn't want to come along for the ride. And that, I used my energy to try to inspire people to come along. And I've said this before, usually people will tell you pretty much up front where they're at. And, as you said, those walls, being pretty sensitive to reading energy, those walls revealed themselves early on. And I kept going back for more, thinking, well, maybe there's a way to make this work. Mm-hmm. And as you said, there's this way of many of us trying to use relationships to avoid our greater purpose and to hide out in our littleness and to not be sitting in the huge vacuum of, oh my God, I've got to fulfill my purpose. Instead, getting caught in these drama bonds of, trying to make it work. And yeah, it just doesn't work. And, I had clear understanding in my mind in some of these relationships what I was to be doing with myself in terms of my purpose, and inviting people to come along. And, one of my friends now, 20 years ago practically was saying, hey, this is what I'm called to, and waiting for, a few years, waiting to see if they would come. And it didn't happen, and I had to move on. And I still, on certain levels, watched myself through other relationships and other dynamics in my life, waiting for others to pick up the torch with me. And the value of it is that I've been shown over and over again, there is no one outside of yourself that's going to do it. You have got to pick up the torch yourself and cultivate your relationship with the divine. And that's the one that you want. The one that you want, Elizabeth, is in your own heart and in your own linking up and syncing up with a greater force that is the divine mind. That is the only place of satisfaction and the only place of true intimacy. But boy, getting to that clarity in my mind has been quite the journey. A long, hard slog with many profound teachers. Profound. Deeply grateful for every single being that has crossed my path. They have shown me so much about myself. So grateful. Love them all. And also heard some of them I shouldn't have gotten into a relationship with. Like one of them I heard before, do not do it. I literally heard the guidance, do not do this. I did it anyway. And it was a huge distraction and caused me to have to transmute lots of energetics that were not helpful to my greater journey. Sometimes you have to swallow a tough nut, of what you've done.
I don't know why this reminds me of one of my relationships. Maybe just to say, this can happen. This can happen. I met, it was like a mutual friend of my then husband and myself. We had this mutual friend, and I ended up kind of breaking up my marriage because I fell in love with this guy, our friend. And it was probably not meant to happen. It didn't feel really good in the moment. And it became very quickly obvious that it was actually, and maybe this is kind of weird for some people, but it felt like a past life scenario trying to play itself out again. I wasn't really aware of this myself, but he kept, telling this story of the past life as a samurai, and somehow I was a, part of his samurai life. And I just could not, it was not something I could really vibe with, because here I am, me now, not Japanese in any way. I'm like, just a normal kind of person trying to be on my spiritual path, and I'm not trying to live in the past at all. And so when this story kept coming up, it was like, this is not working. This is not working for me. I can't, this is not going to be playing out. It doesn't work for me. And I think, maybe that's also sometimes where these kind of romantic ideas come in, of there are still parts of you stuck in some other timeline that, maybe there are regrets or abandonment or, I couldn't save you sort of stories that are still running around in the mind without you really knowing it. It's so important that we really look at, what's actually running this desire for relationships. I remember being really small, and I think it was some kind of school trip, and there were kids there that I didn't really know. I don't, it was such a weird thing in my mind. I don't really remember all the specifics, but there was one boy that showed me some affection, and it was very innocent and, little kids. But there was something that got stuck in my mind around like, oh, that's what I could have. And I never saw this boy again. You know, it was like this one day and then gone. And like, that was like this moment of like, oh my God, I could have had such a nice thing here. You know, I'm like I don't know how old I was, 7? And that experience of, wow, somebody other than my parents has a love for me, like a genuine love. And then I didn't have that anymore. It was like I was just constantly looking. I was like, you know, pretending to be in relationships with my favorite musicians or, you know, favorite actors or, you know, like the Disney movies you're talking about. I like every time I could, you know, watch one of these movies. My grandma had actually given me all these Disney movies on VHS, and I was just like, these are so great. You know, so it was like this, it was a really big thing in my mind to have some kind of requited love.
Yeah, it's deep in the mind. It's deep in. I mean, you know, if you go to most people's homes who have little girls, you know, it's like you're going to find those DVDs. And
I was
those,
like falling in love with my sister's friends who were like, you know, my sister's like 9-10 years older than me, and she had friends that were older than her. And I'm like, oh my God, I love this, you know, and like writing letters to them.
It becomes like a mania.
It was, it was like really, really so much focus and energy in the very wrong direction.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've talked about the programming so many times. It's so thick. As a little kid, most of us are like, you know, who are you going to marry? Who's your boyfriend? Who do you love? You know, somebody's asking us those questions right from the beginning, you know, when we're still in our quantum, you know, soupiness of blank screen, you know, it's like it gets dumped in when you're highly programmable. You're like highly programmable until you're like 10 years old. So it's no wonder. And, you know, I had different versions of it. But, you know, it's interesting hearing you talk about the idea of the past life, because it seems like people that I've worked with, you know, just sort of using things as an idea, as a concept to get into ideas in the mind. You know, it seems like I find that there are lots of people that have made gazillions of oaths and vows. And, you know, somebody may be like, I can't seem to move through this relationship with a family member. And then when I sit with spirit, it's like, it's been lifetime after lifetime after lifetime of trying to resolve this stuff. So it does seem that the idea of karmic relationships that come around. And as you said, you have to either choose like, well, you know, maybe we could just be complete with this, or then maybe you're going to sign up and just try to dance it out one more time, you know, and maybe it'll be another lifetime where you just try to struggle through it, or maybe you'll get the gumball of insight, get the download like, oh, this unmanageable relationship is still unmanageable, and I'm not going to try to crack this nut ever again. You know, like what a gift of freedom to realize like this is an illusion. This illusion of this relationship being anything else, you know, I'm just going to let it drop and deal with myself around it. Deal with what's in my mind around it rather than trying to play it out one more time with this seeming person. As you said, maybe I've got an abandonment story running lifetime after lifetime. We've all got an abandonment issue in our mind, thinking that we abandoned the divine and that the divine abandoned us. Why have you forsaken me? We all feel like we're lost children here on some level. Fallen angels. Yeah, I mean, it's so deep in. So if we keep trying to work it out in these dysfunctional relationships instead of coming and saying, oh my God, here it is again. I've got some story about how I deserve to be abused, how I deserve to be left, how I have to keep trying to work it out with the next lover or the next whatever. It's like, how's it working? Not well, other than to keep you spun out and keep you from your purpose. Which is to deal with yourself, forgive it yourself, and start being in alignment to serve the divine. That's what we're really trying to do, is just another form of distraction. It's a big one, too. It's a socially acceptable form of distraction that's really like, Aren't you married yet? Who do you have a boyfriend
Promoted,
yet?
not
how
even
many,
just
you know, how
accepted.
many people's parents have I heard, you know, throughout my life? Oh, do you have a girlfriend yet? Do you have a boyfriend yet? When are you going to get married? Right? There's so much energy behind it. So it's not to judge anybody, but it's just, let's look at it really clearly. Let's look at it really clearly. Same thing.
Yeah, I just keep thinking, you know, I've never watched the series, but I mentioned it to Elizabeth at one point. There's this series on Netflix, I think it's called You. And it's basically, I don't know much about it, but I think what I've heard about it is that basically there's this very good-looking sociopath stalker that, I don't know if he even kills women or what, but basically, he's not someone that traditionally you would really want to be with. But because he's so good looking, there was this hype on the internet of women just like going crazy over this guy who's absolutely nuts. And I like this makes me think of this too, because I, you know, like Elizabeth said, we sometimes pull these cards just to get some energetics. And the first card that fell out of one of my tarot decks is the Devil card, and it's a really interesting one because it's a very handsome, charming,
He's
black
the sexy devil.
Yeah,
He's the bad boy devil.
Yeah, and what he's doing is he's got strings in his hand, and he's controlling
little puppet master,
a person. And that person is not doing good. So, you know, like, yeah, I think relationships are just this big thing that the ego can so easily use for its purposes to continue these stories of unworthiness. And yeah, like you said, I'm worthy to be abused and to not be loved. Most of the time, relationships are actually not for love. And it's always interesting, the stories, you know, that people will share sometimes of like being in totally abusive relationships and knowing they should get out. But they don't, because if they do, they're going to be even lonelier and even unhappier. And at least they're getting a little bit of attention, even if it's in the form of abuse.
Or it's complicated in their minds to get out. What about the kids? What about the money? What about the assets? What about the houses? They don't want to give up the worldly things for their peace of mind and to follow their heart. It's like, you know, it's devastating. You know, and I get it. I mean, the people that I've been in relationships with in terms of like the so-called significant other, of course I love them. I still do. Lots of them put myself at the front of the line, dysfunctional, you know? So it's just looking at it squarely. Like we weren't operating from our highest, clearest state of mind. Not as oh, you're a jerk. No. Two people with some patterns looking to be healed or looking to be avoided. And sometimes it was one camp or the other. And it's like they've been great and helpful to help me see those things. So thank you to each and every one. But it's like, yeah, it's crazy. It's just, whew. And as you said earlier, like, what would possibly bring a relationship into my life at this point? God only knows, right? It would have to be to serve a higher purpose spiritually, only for that. You know, were there times, as you said, you know, not wanting to be lonely or, you know, wanting to distract myself or wanting somebody to carry the load with me? Have those things run in the background of my mind? Yeah. Did I know that they were running at the time? Not necessarily. But once I got into them, there they were. And they weren't enough. None of those things were enough to be the fabric that would keep it going. The only thing that would have ever been enough would have been to fulfill a purpose spiritually. It's the only thing that's ever mattered to me, really. It's the only thing I was ever looking for in my relationships. A sense of the sacred, a sense of union. You know, I was thinking the other day, I had this guy I dated in Manhattan, and we got a new apartment, and I put this little plaque over the door. It was like, bless this house for the two of us, kind of a thing. It was like a blessing. And I remember showing it to him, and it was like nothing to him. That's okay. but it's not okay for me. Like somebody else was talking to me recently, a person I had been working with, about how her husband was smoking pot all the time. I said, hey, to each his own. Everybody's entitled to do it how they want to. But I said, for me, that would be a non-starter. I've done that where I tried to compromise about, oh, it's no big deal. No, it is a big deal for me. To be living with somebody that's checking out, for me, that's checking out. Unless you're doing it around the fire for sacred ceremony, where you're clearly using it as a medicine in your mind for like connecting with the divine and learning about yourself and healing your mind, it's a non-issue. Can't do a relationship like that. So we get clear, like, what's it for me? We talked last time about integrity. What's our compromise? What are our sacred cows? What are the things we will or won't deal with? Those things get clearer and clearer as we go on the path if we investigate with the Spirit. What would you have me do? Well, if it's to be single, great. Yeah, it's actually pretty good.
Well, and it's a great opportunity just to sit with that. Like, I can tell, I can feel that it's not given for me to be in a relationship right now. And it's bringing up all of this stuff, right? Like, now I have to be with myself. You know, I have to really just, this is my time to focus on what is it for me? What am I, you know, to be doing with my life right now? And yeah, I've been talking with somebody and she's got this on and off sort of relationship that's sort of always there if she wants it. You know, she can kind of always go back to it. And yeah, she was sort of in a prayer around what to do with it. And, you know, when we were joining, it was pretty clear, like, doesn't really sound like that's really still meant to be happening. Doesn't sound like you actually want that. But there's still that part of the mind that sees the security and, you know, something, you know, even around the location of where that relationship is at. There's this attraction, something old, some kind of old familiarity and comfort that, you know, these are like the ego's little fibers and stories that come in like, oh, but it's not so bad. You can make it work, right? Nothing really bad's happening. Like, you don't really have a reason to get out of this or stop this. But, you know, that inner voice that's actually speaking for the truth in your mind, you've already heard it. And when you've heard it, you have to just kind of go with the burn of that sometimes and being alone. And on the other side of it is like this amazing gift of, wow, I don't need that. I don't have to keep looking for this other person. And, you know, also this like, oh, and if it happens to fall into place at some point, it's like, okay, you know, then it'll be really given by the Spirit. It's not something you've grasped for. It's like a gift that you receive for further expansion and strengthening and further, you know, just getting more gunk out of the mind.
It was just coming into mind, Thich Nhat Hanh just passed away, and he was one of the first spiritual teachers I read any literature from. Peace is Every Step was the first of his that I read. And I remember in some book of his or some talk I listened to years ago, he said, you know, if you feel like you want to have a partner, spend a year getting to know them as your friend. Like, don't go anywhere beyond friend for a full year. See what's really there, truly, not the projection of, oh, I want to be loved, or, oh, I want somebody to help me pay the bills, or whatever. That's really unconscious. Most of us are operating unconsciously until we sit and do the deep inner work. And as you said, we're going for union. You know, yoga is about union. Not union with a partner, union with yourself and the divine. And if you're in your proper alignment with yourself, then as you said earlier, like everyone's going to be your partner and your lover. Like you said it somewhere earlier of like wanting all of it, like wanting the fullness of the divine, where everybody, I remember a guy I dated, it's like as I was expanding, there was like jealousy happening. And it was like, I can love everyone and love you. Well, that didn't seem to compute for him. And that's okay. Yeah. But it's like, you know, you'll never feel safe and secure in a relationship if you're not safe and secure within yourself and with the divine. You know, if you haven't looked at your relationship issue with your parents and with God of your understanding, whatever it is for you, you will not be able to be in a healthy relationship, from my way of looking at it. You have to go through picking those apart so that you know what's in your mind. You know what your expectations are, your projections, your demands, your hopes, your fears. Otherwise, you're just laying them at the person's feet unreasonably, unlovingly. It is not unconditional. It'll be full of a boatload of conditions. And, you know, what's the divorce rate? It's pretty high, right? So anyway, we don't have, at least I don't have any answers for anybody else, but I know that, yeah, like all of it, it's just been extricating myself out of these stories and these programs and these fantasies and expectations. And every piece that gets unplugged, there's more spaciousness in the mind. There's more love for everyone and everything.
More ease too, just such a relaxation. Like, I'm very grateful, you know, like the last couple of years I've gone through these phases of like, I just really want to be in a relationship, you know. I've had, you know, at least twice, 2 phases, you know, in the last couple of years where that was like, I was getting a little hyper focused there in that direction again. And I had to just really like drop it at one point and just kind of totally let it go. And it really made me so much more relaxed. And I feel so like happy that it's not something that I'm looking for right now. Could be totally different tomorrow again. I have no idea. But my mind is so much more, yeah, just relaxed. That now that, you know, I don't have this like, oh, when's my next, where would I even find somebody? You know, I don't really have a social life. So it's like, sometimes I would have these thoughts like, how will I ever find somebody again? You know, like I know nobody. And it would really like mess with my mind. But now it's like, it's not my focus.
Yeah.
I just want to fulfill my purpose.
Yeah.
And, you know, if ever there is to be a relationship again, an intimate relationship with another person, that has to be so above and beyond obvious.
The frying pan, I'll take it in a good way.
In a good way, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. Otherwise, nope.
Yeah.
You know, it's a touchy subject, relationships, and most people might not really want to listen to this talk because it's going to touch on their own lives and, you know, might make you examine areas that you didn't think you want to examine, or places where you've parked yourself in a relationship that might be fine but just not expansive anymore. But, you know, the Spirit really walks with you through it. Every one of my relationships, whether I was really on my spiritual path yet or not, whether I was aware of Spirit, looking back, there was a really good orchestration happening for each one of them, the going in and the going out of the relationships, and they've been all very healing and helpful.
So again, you're just invited, I guess, to just be in exploration of what's been there for you in your relationships on all levels, and really just using it as, you know, we had a couple talks ago, spelunking, you know, the cave dive, to just see what's in there for you so that, you know, you can just live, as you said, more expansively, more freely, and feel like you're coming home to yourself, you know, and not looking outside yourself to anyone to satisfy you and to fulfill your needs, you know, to really just be your own big juju that can potentially meet another one if it's called for. But yeah, not using a relationship to try to fill a need or to do something for you. Instead, to have your life be a contribution to everyone. And maybe it'll happen in a so-called marriage or partnership or intimate relationship or whatever, and maybe it won't. So whatever your relationship configurations are, know that it must be just right for now, but stay open. Stay open to see what's in there for you. So,
Yeah.
here we are, another one down, and it's been fun and helpful to me. Thanks for doing this, Yuta.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for listening.
Lots
See
of
you
love.
next time.